Good morning. Welcome to another episode of my podcast. Um, I took a pause because I still am looking to into the topic or into the title of what this podcast will be. So, in the meantime, we'll just say the Bola Odina podcast. Um, and as I get more into additional episodes, I trust that the purpose and the title of this podcast will naturally just reveal itself. So hopefully you all can be patient and sort of go with me on this journey as I discover it for myself or we discover it together, which to me is probably a more authentic and more organic way to do things anyways. And I think it's probably at the core of it, what this podcast is about. I think a lot of times, we see things that are fully baked and ready to go and presented to us for us to consume. But the process, what's taking place in the kitchen, how the product, the service, the human being, whatever, how they got here is unknown. So we end up sort of just, taking a guess as to how easy or not easy the process may have been and how daunting it would be for us to undertake such a thing. So that's what I'm hoping to not do with this podcast, and I'm pretty sure it's impossible for me to do that just given how raw it is in terms of, just the process that I'm going through. So I say all that to say that I don't yet have a name for the podcast. There's a part of me that explored or toyed with partners in crime. And the reason I like that, so let me just put it out there that podcast name apparently has been taken. I looked it up and someone already has it. So unless I want to do a variation on it, it's not available for me. But the reason I like that is because what I want as I undertake this process of designing my best life or the life of my dreams or whatever it is, in terms of how I want to spend my time, attention, resources moving forward, I want it to be something that is bold. I want it to be me fully having control of my time, fully having control of my energy, the people that I spend time with, the creative outlets that I explore, the work that I take, the clients that I work with. I really just want to have full ownership. And I think a lot of times that's something that we don't have or we're told is not accessible to us, at least not until we retire, right? So there's this idea of really just waiting. You're born, you go to school, you learn a skill or you learn about a bunch of areas that you could get into. By 21 or so, you're supposed to settle into some sort of career. And at that point, it's the waiting game where you're really just going through the motions, doing things that are not interesting, not exciting, because the goal is at the end of this journey, right? That's when you finally get to retire at 65 and live the life of your dreams. And for someone like me, maybe fortunately or unfortunately, that's just not something that I buy into, at least not anymore. Having been in the corporate environment or having been a professional for going on 20 years, I've realized that, life is meant to be lived right now. And, someone's idea of how we should be living our lives is really just that. That's just their perception and their idea of how this life could be lived. And we could buy into other people's ideas of how we should live our lives, or we could, design our lives for ourselves. So my goal is to do just that. And I thought the title, Partners in Crime, would be somewhat ideal or would capture the essence of this podcast because essentially, when you're doing something that's considered to be criminal or, something that's that should not be accessible to you or us as individuals, to do it would almost seem criminal. It seems like you're getting to, experience something that is not meant for you. It's meant for a different class of people, for folks who are specifically called aside to experience such a thing. But for me, I think I want to explore breaking down those barriers that I've either put in place for myself or that's been put in place for me, so that I can live that life right now and explore these opportunities in these areas and, do the things that I want right now, which would almost be considered criminal, right? So that's the path that I'm on. But like I said, that topic or the title has already been taken, so I'll have to explore another topic for the podcast. But so that's the background. So let's dive into today's podcast. So I sent last week's episode out to, I want to say about 8 or 9 people, really good friends, family members, just to have a listen. Give me some feedback, so I get a sense for, what resonates with people, what people liked about it, what I need to improve on, and whether or not this is a crazy thing that I should do if I want to do and really just keep to myself because no one is interested in whatever mess I'm spewing out. And the feedback has been overwhelming, to say the least. Now, I only shared it with 8 or 9 people, so it's very difficult for it to be too overwhelming, but I think as a whole the feedback has been pretty positive. And to summarize, the feedback that I've gotten from everyone, I think number one, the consensus is, just to start out and put it out there, that a 1-hour episode is way too long, which I agree with. I think last week, obviously if you listened to it, I came in, had no plans, and really just jumped in there and kind of just went on for a while. I think I thought it was important to spend some time giving the backstory as to how I got here. I don't know that I went into all the other areas that I could have gone into, but hopefully that those are areas that can be explored later. But overall, I think moving forward, my goal is to keep these short, to about 25 to 30 minutes, if that. But that will be the goal. So as one of the topic that was explored last week was, this being a practice, something that I go into the studio every week, and my goal is to improve at least one aspect of the podcast, or if we were to extend this into our day-to-day living, the practice of how we show up in different areas of our lives. If the goal is to just be incrementally better than the last time you showed up for something, or the last time you did something, you participated in something, if just to be one step better and to pick that area where you want to be better, then that's a win. So my goal today is to keep it short, keep it to 30 minutes and under. So we'll see how that goes. So that was one feedback: too long, keep it short, and that's the goal for today. The next one, which I thought was pretty interesting, in that it fascinated me, was that it seemed authentic. And I appreciate that. And really, I think I actually really enjoyed getting that feedback, because I have been wanting to be more intentional with my authenticity for probably a good 5 years now. And I think why that's important to me is because it's just too much of a headache to try to be anything else. Trying to step into a space of being an expert or being something that you're not, personally, has always worn me out, and I've never really been good at it. I think for the most part, part of why I enjoy my friendships, with my girlfriends or my family members or, other relationships that I may have is because, when I'm authentic, those conversations that we get into or the activities that we engage in, they end up being so meaningful and so much more enjoyable. So, like I said, about 5 years ago, I realized that it's much better for me to just be me. I mean, what's the point of trying to put up a front? What's the point of trying to, show up fully baked when number one, I mean, that is just not who I am at my core. So I would have to be, stepping into this space where I'm pretending to be something I'm not, which is particularly draining. But I also find that that's also not relatable. I think, the reason why human beings connect to each other is because, we want to be able to see the humanity in others, because that's how we connect to each other. And what I've realized is that if I am putting forth a specific idea about myself, it's very different. I'm blocking off the natural energies that are sort of emanating from me for others to connect to, because I'm too busy blocking and tackling and trying to present a specific perspective. So it was really refreshing for you all to provide that feedback about how authentic this came across, because I think that's something that I generally like to walk in, as much as possible. I know there are times when you have to put on a front, if you're trying to get a job or, meeting folks for the first time for whatever reason, but that's not a space I enjoy, and for the most part I like to be my authentic self. So I do appreciate that feedback. The other feedback I got was just in general that I should have couched the topic better so that people have a sense of what they're listening to, and I love that. I agree with that. I think that's something that I'm still working on, and that was something that I tried to prep for this week by really just narrowing down what this week's topic should be. And I went back and forth, just trying to figure out what should I focus on. And what I decided was, episode 2 is not going to be the episode where it'll all come together. So that's not going to be the incremental step that I take today. However, I acknowledge the importance of it, because I think, for folks who are listening, you kind of want to get a sense for where this is going. What are the key takeaways, so I know if it's worth my time. So I do appreciate that, and that's something that I'm going to continue to work on, is really just summarizing what you can expect to take away from each episode moving forward. But first, I think I need to get a better sense for what this will be. Who's the audience? Is this going to be a personal podcast, or is it going to be more of a mesh between personal and business? And also, what's the vibe that I'm going for? And I think lastly, when I initially envisioned, this podcast, it was meant to be an exchange between two people. I've always found that I enjoy having great conversations with my friends, and they've always been enriching to my lives whenever they're deep conversations that really occupy the space of authenticity and talk about real issues that we have in our lives and that we're going through, either as mothers, women, wives, friends in our 30s, about to be 40, just all the things that we struggle with that, we're experiencing and that occupy our mind and mental space, but that are not always readily dived into in other spaces or conversations that we have. These are the topics that I like to explore with my friends, and they've always been so intriguing and engaging that I can't imagine that they wouldn't be beneficial for others to sort of be flies on the wall as we dive into these topics. However, 2 episodes in, and I'm still the only one talking to myself. So this podcast may shift from what it was originally envisioned to be, which is me interviewing folks to explore different aspects of our lives, to me just really talking about what I'm experiencing and providing updates on what I've done in the week as I look to get my hustle on. So as I get more clarity around that, I'll certainly start putting frameworks around what each episode will be about and the topic that I want to dive into. But, we're not there this episode. So hopefully by next episode, that's something that we can institute. However, I think another topic or another feedback that I got from some people, I guess, who didn't know my story or our story with, my relationship story with Mac, my husband. The other feedback that I got was, oh my God, I can't believe that you guys ever thought about getting a divorce. Which I thought was interesting because I think I've always been pretty open about some of the struggles that I've experienced in my marriage. And I've always been open because I think it's a natural part of any relationship for there to be ups and downs, turbulence, great times, not so great times. So it's never been a thing of shame for me necessarily. If anything, that's also kind of goes hand in hand with my notion of wanting to be authentic, showing up with the good, the bad, and the ugly. And sometimes, it's great. Actually, most times it's really great. My relationship, that is. Most times things are, for the most part, pretty great with me, but there are times when, it's pretty ugly. I'm struggling, and I am such an emotional person, and I think I wear my emotions on my sleeves that if things are not going well, the people who are close to me are going to hear about it. And it's because I'm looking for other people to weigh in and provide some advice and feedback on what I'm doing wrong and, what I could do better and how we could, occupy the space of happiness more in our relationship. So I think most people are aware of the struggles that Mac and I had, or that we've been having. I mean, Mac and I have always been pretty passionate people with each other. So when it comes to what we agree or disagree with, and that shows up in different ways. And I think once we started having children, we became even more passionate because now. We want to get this rearing thing right. We're so invested in how we raise our children, and being that we come from two different perspectives, we were raised in very different households, we just had very different ways of going about that. And I think that probably exacerbated, all the issues that we were having, as well as, some of the other stuff that I got into last time. So it's interesting because people were like, oh my God, you all seem to be doing so great, especially our newer friends, or maybe some of the folks that just were not aware of the issues that we were having. So that feedback was interesting. But I think what I took away from that is, just look at God. And I say that laughing because, that's just a funny phrase in general. But I say that because it's also an important lesson that I took away from that period of time. Because to be honest, as bleak as I felt things were with our relationship, it's amazing at the time, as bleak as things were at the time, it's amazing to look back now, given where we are, and just be awed by either how far we've come or just how much of a different space we're in now. Like, we seem to be vibing in such a way that is almost criminal, back to partners in crime. I think we get each other. We're in a very good space. He lets me do me, I let him do him. And, honestly, it's to look at it as an outsider, it's almost poetic, just how we interact with each other. And, let me just put everyone at peace and, let folks know that you can't be in a dark space with your relationship, with your marriage, and, you know, as you push through, and on the other side, if you're willing to do the work, if you're willing to look internally and see how you could be contributing, or, you know, what areas of yourself needs to be changed or adjusted so that you can get to a better place. If you're willing to put all that work in, you can get great results. And, you know, I'm not here to be the, you know, gushy, you know, this too can happen for you type of person, because I think everyone should always do whatever they want to do at the moment. But at this moment, I think things are beautiful in a poetic way. I mean, it's like poetry, how well our relationship is. So, and I'm always happy to dive into how we've gotten here. But things are great. All is well on the Audina household front. But then again, you know, this was the same thing Wendy Williams said, and then we all know what happened there. I think a month later she filed for a divorce. So I don't know. I mean, but you know, for all who want to take me at my word, all is well. You know, Mac and I are doing perfectly fine. So thank God for that. Yeah. So we're 21 minutes into this episode, and I think that wraps up some sort of the main feedback that I got. So I appreciate that. Well, one last feedback that I got before I dive into today's topic, you know, now that we only have 10 minutes left. It's funny because clearly I need to learn how to better manage time. So that's also going to be my takeaway here. But the other feedback I got was that it would have been great for me to provide a bit of an introduction on myself. You know, who I am, how many children I have, you know, just a high-level summary, so people know who they're listening to. So, here we go. Bola Audina. I am 38 years old. I just had a birthday, July 1st, Cancer. I have 3 children. The oldest is 14. It's funny. I laugh because the oldest is actually not 14. He is currently 13. And that's funny because my younger one, my middle daughter, is also 13. So that's another story for another time. But essentially, I have Irish twins. So my oldest will turn 14 in 14 days on August 11th. No, that's really more like 10 days. So he'll turn 14 in a couple of weeks. But it's interesting because for about 2 months, maybe 6 weeks out of the year, both of them, generally speaking, will be the same age until he then turns an age older. So both Nuamin and Nubia, who are my first 2 children, are currently 13. And then I have my youngest, Amini, who is 8, and she will be 9 in October. So I have a boy and 2 girls. The oldest is getting ready to go to high school. Nubia, the oldest is Nuamin, if I didn't say his name. Nubia is getting ready to go to the 8th grade, so she is finishing out middle school. And the youngest is Amini, and she is going to the 4th grade. And let me just take a moment to say, you know, these are the most beautiful children ever. I mean, I love my kids. I think most people, I think everyone loves their children, but I'm particularly enamored by my children. So part of the reason why I am, and let me take that back. I am enamored by them now. Parenting has definitely been a journey for me, but I think part of the growth process and where I am now has been, or one of the benefits of that is that I'm now in a very good space with enjoying motherhood. I love the kids. I mean, just being able to take a moment and just examine them and observe them is so interesting. I mean, they're fascinating children, fascinating people. And that's probably how it is for most children. So I would say for us parents who are so busy, you know, grinding, working 9 to 8 or whatever the time is, and coming home and working some more, having very little time to really spend observing your children or engaging your children. I think it's important to take some time out to do that, because you would just be so amazed and fascinated by them. But they're really good kids. Really, really love them. So that's my family in a nutshell. I live in the DMV area, Maryland, Rockville, Maryland. And one last thing about me is I'm in the process of transitioning. I am a management consultant. I've been in the consulting space for about 10 years or so, and work for a large consulting firm. But now I am exploring sort of just going out on my own, doing my own thing, providing management consulting and business advisory support for small to mid-sized businesses, in particular women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses, because I think, this is a service that they could really use and benefit from all of the work that I've provided for the federal sector and for larger organizations over the past 10 years. So that's the process I'm also currently undertaking, and part of what I'll be talking about in my podcast, just so that people see the journey from the very beginning. I mean, I'm in the very beginning stages. The only thing I've done thus far is really registered the business name. I have a business account, and right now, just grinding, going out, meeting potential clients, potential partners who can provide referrals, so that I can have a client and then be underway. But when I talk about being in this space of wanting to design my life or what I want it to be, that's part of it. Me wanting to do something different, live a different life, travel more, spend more time with my children, not be stuck in traffic because it doesn't really fulfill me. Getting up every day and deciding, for the most part, what I want to do with my time. So that's the space that I'm in, and that's really what I want to explore with this podcast is, how do you go from living the very traditional life, getting up every day, having the traditional job, waiting for retirement to really live and travel, to now that I've sort of realized that if you have a different perspective and sort of push the boundaries beyond what's been given to you in terms of how your life should be, you can design your life to be whatever you want. You can travel more. You can work from different places around the world. You can take your children out of school and travel with them for 6 months, which is actually a goal that I have for next year. Not travel for 6 months with them, maybe about a month. Just travel somewhere, or maybe different countries, and homeschool them, spend more time with them, and essentially just have us discover the world and each other together. And that's really the phase that I'm in now. I want to push the boundaries. I want to live the life of most people's dreams, and not from a financial perspective, because I don't care to get rich and necessarily, but I want the lifestyle that is afforded when you do have those resources. And I'm convinced that you don't necessarily need to have $1 million in the bank to live that lifestyle. I think you just need to change your perspective, question some assumptions that we've always had, and push beyond the boundaries that we've always limited ourselves to. So that's what I'm here to do with this podcast. So if anyone has ideas as to what an appropriate name could be for this podcast based on the summary that I've provided, I'll be happy to take them into consideration. So that's a summary of who I am, and now I'm looking at the time. There's a minute left before we get before this makes the 30-minute mark. So I guess I'll just try to wrap up and say the purpose of today's podcast is really, number one, to thank you all for the great feedback that you provided for those who listen to the podcast. Thank you for encouraging me to keep moving forward down this path, and for appreciating my authentic voice and feeling like it could be of value out in this very crowded space of everyone having an opinion, because that's really not what I'm here to do. I really just want to be as open as I can in case it could be somewhat relatable, or someone could be inspired to also decide to live their best life as a result of it. So thank you for that. And what I also wanted to do was just to give you all a better sense of who I am, give you an overview of what's motivating me to undertake this process. Who my favorite people in the world are, and those are my children and my husband, and my great friends. I mean, I really love my friends and family members. I'm in a very good space with the love and the people that I have in my life, and I'm just so grateful for that. And then lastly, just to talk about some of the lessons learned, which was that, if I'm to continue down this path, this process, I'm going to have to find a voice for it, find a topic for it, and, figure out what it'll look like in a way that's more concrete. And right now, I think the verdict is, as I bring this episode to an end, is the journey continues, and we'll see what comes out of it. So thank you once again for listening. I'm going to cut it short and keep it 30 minutes, and I'll be back next time to share more progress that I've made, or whatever setbacks, if they're not progress, to share my experiences in general, and see how this community continues to build. So with that, thank you, and have a great weekend.